We have been so honored to partner with the UCLA Extension, and they are a sponsor of today's program. So we thank you all very much. I think that being lifelong learners as the students of UCLA Extension are, and as our town hall audiences are, it's a great match. Today, we're eager to hear and learn more about the City of Los Angeles' initiatives and endeavors in technology and innovation. And our speaker, Jeanne Holm, works at the cross-section of innovation, open data, and education. She's the Deputy Chief Information Officer for this whole city of Los Angeles, focusing on issues ranging from homelessness to predictive analytics. Prior to joining Mayor Garcetti's executive team, Jeanne held the following distinguished positions. This is amazing. Senior consultant with the World Bank, evangelist for data.gov for the US White House, chief knowledge architect at NASA JPL, and she's also a fellow of the United Nations International Academy of Astronautics. And Jeanne has received many honors and accolades for her work on data science, knowledge management, and civic innovation. Plus, she still devotes time to teach at her alma mater, UCLA, and is a distinguished instructor there. So would you all please help join me in welcoming Jeanne Holm.
So I am so honored to be here with you today. Thank you. Did I get your attention? Is everybody totally awake now? I am too short to stand behind the podium, so I'm just going to stand up here and walk around. So I am honored to be here, and especially honored, as always, to take part in anything related to UCLA and UCLA Extension. I have been a lifelong Bruin. I got my undergraduate degree there. I have been teaching at Extension for 20 years, and every time I come to Wayne with a crazy idea, he's like, okay, let's do that together. So there's always that moment of, oh my God, I can't believe she's asking this, and then we go and make interesting things happen together. So I am grateful for the opportunity to not only be a lifelong learner, but to help others also understand their passion for learning. So the work that I do at the City of Los Angeles is really interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we're also going to talk about technology. So how many people here work in technology or call yourself technologists? Whoa, okay, that's more than I thought. So one, there will be no quizzes today. I'm not going to show you any code, although those of you who are technologists, we can talk that later. I'm not going to talk about mathematics. I'm not going to show, actually, I don't think this is the most number of words on any slides. Instead, I'm going to tell you stories about how we're trying new things in technology in Los Angeles and around the world, and how that's trying to shape and improve people's lives. So hopefully this will all make a lot of sense. I know this one's a little bit hard to read, but since I've been up here talking to you, 2 million Google searches have happened. 48 hours of YouTube videos have been uploaded. 2,000 people have checked in online to various locations. In a minute, every minute, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, all of this is happening online. A huge amount of data that is interesting for researchers and interesting for us to understand and gets us access to information. But also, this is data about us. This is data about what we click on, what we like, what we share, data about ourselves, our organizations. So today, although I'm a very positive and upbeat person generally, I'm also going to talk a little bit about the other side of technology, just so that we all become cyber aware. So does anybody recognize this? I'll give you a hint. Are there any gamers in the house? Really? Okay, so let me just be clear. My name is Jeanne and I'm a gamer. Okay, so I hear the first step towards recovery is admitting I have a problem. So I game a lot. This is SimCity. Okay, so some people have heard of SimCity. SimCity is an online game that lets you create a household, a community, a city, different kinds of levels. So this is one way in which people in Los Angeles think we could have a city. Okay, so this is like no holds barred. I want to design a city using cool technology. I particularly like the idea of taking a roller coaster directly into my offices at City Hall. I think that's one of the things that could be improved. So clearly this has got lots of stuff going on, right? But it's an idea of how we can co-create a city around us. How do we take it from just being architects, just being city planners, to making sure that every one of us has a voice in what our city will look like, and crazy ideas about how to make the city more livable and more interesting. All right, so not gaming. Anybody recognize this? Blade Runner, right? The Blade Runner. So this is a different view. So Blade Runner takes place in Los Angeles, 2049. So this is a different, maybe not so optimistic view. And have you guys seen Blade Runner? It's a very dystopian view of the future, very dark. So, but what do you see in this picture? Flying cars, right? Lots of dense, packed people, lots of diversity. We're seeing lots of signs in different languages. This cacophony of visual and auditory stimuli, right? So it just becomes like this massive sense of I'm immersed into a television ad 24 hours a day. It's a different version of the future of our city. So somewhere between Blade Runner and SimCity is going to be the future of Los Angeles. And I would like all of you to be on that journey with the mayor and I, to understand how we want to design that city. What is it you love about Los Angeles? What is it you don't love about it? We'll talk about traffic, number one. We're number one in traffic. And then really kind of how we are trying to shift Los Angeles to a place that really engages people more through technology. So I'm going to start with the very first use of data. Okay, so everybody knows what data is. You use it in whatever your business is, you're using data in some way. But this is the first time somebody tried to use data to drive a social decision. So in 1854, Jon Snow, not the Game of Thrones Jon Snow, this is a different Jon Snow, he was a physician. I told Jane that I would talk about healthcare today. So Jon Snow was a physician in London, and he had no experience with maps or data, but what he saw was a lot of people getting sick from cholera and dying. And just like an inordinate amount, there was an outbreak and they didn't know what was going on. So he thought he sensed a pattern of who was dying. And the pattern he sensed wasn't who, it was where. So what he did is he created a map, and each of these red dots represented a death. So this is actually a view of the original map. And then you can see that there is, very few deaths over here. There's a couple scattered here, but suddenly something is going on. And when he dove into this and he said, let me go see what's happening right here, it turned out there was a well, a water well, that people were pulling all of their water from. And in that well, there had been a child who had been sick, and the parent had been washing the diapers out, essentially in that well water, and was passing cholera around. So all of these deaths came back to this one well, but nobody would have known. There wasn't like an environmental protection agency at the time. And so suddenly, by having data, by mapping it, by trying to understand the pattern he sensed in it, suddenly they were able to stop the cholera outbreak. They boarded up that one well, it wasn't the whole water table, the one well, they stopped the cholera outbreak. And suddenly, medicine became a data-driven, technology-driven enterprise. And so it really started thinking differently about how we use data to inform ourselves. So this is a sense of what we call a smart city. It's an interesting term that's being used in technology and civic innovation today. The idea that, I guess we're dumb cities today, I'm not really sure, but the idea is we want to become smart cities. And smart cities are really connected cities. So these are cities where we're understanding what's going on around the city. So next time you walk out in the street, I need you to look up. So look up, look around, you'll see street lights, and you'll see sensors on those street lights. You'll see cameras on buildings. You'll see sensors all over the place watching you. It's a little creepy. But what we're doing with that from a city's perspective, the sensors we have in the open landscape and the public spaces are doing things like counting the number of cars, bicyclists, and pedestrians going up and down the street, so that we can put those bike lanes that you're seeing like painted green, so it's a little higher visibility. Sometimes we put cones between the traffic and the bike lanes. Sometimes we put, we'll have to figure out what we're going to do with those scooters now that everybody's riding and dropping everywhere. Exactly. You know, we want to make sure that we are timing things so that where we know that there's an area where we have a lot of people who have disabilities and are in wheelchairs, that we give more time for timing through traffic. We want to make sure that we're looking across the city, collecting this data in a way that helps us better inform about the decisions we have to make every day, so that we can make sure that the traffic flows faster, that people are safer, that streetlights come on because we know that bright light decreases crime. It's like a pretty obvious thing, but we do know that, and so we want to do that. In addition, there's lots of sensors in these public spaces that are not from the government. So those of you who are business owners, you might have sensors outside your businesses, security cameras, that kind of thing. But there are more insidious sensors out there too. So if you've ever been walking down the street with you would never walk and look at your smartphone at the same time. But if you did, you might notice occasionally you get an ad popped up. It's like, wow, that's so cool. I'm in Larchmont, and yeah, I am hungry, and there's a coupon for a restaurant. How did that happen? Okay, well, it's not magic. It happened because there's sensors in the neighborhood that are tracking where you go. These are not government sensors, and wanting to push information to you. So when you're in the public space, think about what you're allowing your phone to collect about you and what you're allowing your phone to share about you. You can go in your security privacy settings and double check. It's a little bit scary. So I use Waze as a traffic app. It took me a long time to actually agree to use Waze, because Waze tracks you everywhere you are at all times. And so that's how they come up with these great algorithms about how fast traffic's going. It's not because every Waze user is using Waze right then, it's because every Waze phone is tracking how fast you're moving. So we trust these companies with a lot of data about ourselves. So as we think about this idea of a smart city, what are we going to do with this kind of data? Well, here's a bunch of terms you might have heard before. This is as technical as this talk gets. So things like artificial intelligence. So the ability to be able to recreate the human decision-making process. You can take AI, as we sometimes call it, all the way to sort of like artificial humans. So if you saw Lucy or other shows where you're actually having robots that seem like people, that's a far out growth of artificial intelligence. Predictive analytics is simply something we all do every day. Right? I want to predict what tomorrow's going to be like. But we want, in a city the size of Los Angeles with 4 million people, 500 square miles, and millions more coming in and out every day for work and play, we want to make sure that we can predict very carefully the future. How much revenue is the city going to have? Where's the traffic going to flow? Where are we likely to have injuries and incidents and accidents? We'll talk about personal assistants, which are just the kinds of things that help you actually get your jobs done better. Machine learning, which is the ability to understand a repetitive process. Internet of Things, which are these sensors that we see all over the city. And blockchain is a newer technology that really helps us start to get a handle around those security issues that we started to talk about. Gamification, my favorite. Virtual and augmented reality, which is the ability to now start to have a view of that future world that you want. To build whatever world you want to co-create with others and to be in that space. And then we'll talk a little bit about open data. So as you think about all of these great opportunities that technology gives us, we also need to balance that a little bit with security. So people are watching. I don't mean this to be frightening, it's just a matter of awareness. to understand that as you share data, as you sign up for that new app, as you agree to put that extra browser add-on into your Chrome or your Firefox or your Explorer, that you're understanding what data you're sharing back and forth. As a government, the city of Los Angeles takes it very, very seriously. And there's a couple of things we do to help protect your privacy and your data. One is that we want to make sure people are aware. So we partner with Northrop Grumman and do a program called Cyber Patriots. So Cyber Patriots works through the LA Unified School District and teaches students as young as 3rd grade how to be cyber safe online. Because kids get online really early, right? Even if they don't have their own device, they're using a computer at home or at school. We want to make sure that they're safe. By the time they get into high school, they're actually doing competitions to try and defend and attack each other in a game environment to be able to do this. North Hollywood High last year won the nationals for Cyber Patriots. Then we also want to make sure that we help our businesses. 2/3 of the businesses here in Los Angeles are owned by immigrants. They're small mom and pop shops. They're small to medium-sized businesses. We want to make sure that those businesses understand how to be cyber safe. Because if you're running a restaurant, if you're running a small business, if you're running a retail shop, the last thing you're thinking about is hiring a technologist. And so we have the LA Cyber Lab that works with over 500 businesses, and anybody's welcome to join it. It's free. We don't have as good as speakers as Carl's able to get here at the town hall talks, but it's a free way to be able to get tools and training and alerts whenever there are things going on around the region, around cybersecurity, and to get some extra help to make sure that you're cyber safe as a business. So we want to make sure we're doing all of that. And then when it comes to your data, so every time you have a transaction with the city, we protect that data aggressively. So we make sure your data isn't shared. And in some cases, we actually erase data. So I mentioned those cameras we have around the city. You'll see them at particularly busy intersections, kind of focused in on the intersection. And what we're doing is we're not sort of watching you all the time. What we're doing is counting again the number of cars going through that intersection, the timing, making sure we understand if people are crossing against the lights. And so we flush that data out periodically so that we don't actually hold a long-term record, because we don't want someone to come back and say, we know you collect video. We want to make sure we get access to that, because as a government agency, some of our records are open to public requests for information. So one of the things we do share a bunch of data on is our open data portal. So this lets us bring together thousands of data sets from all of the different agencies here in the city of Los Angeles and make it available free to everybody. So when I was at the White House, I built sort of the first version of an open data portal called data.gov, and we opened up 500,000 data sets from 175 federal agencies. And so here in Los Angeles, like many cities, we have an open data portal. We put the information here. So say you want to locate a new gas station or a new business. You want to know who else is in that neighborhood, how many people go through that neighborhood, what kind of demographics there are. Well, you can find all that data here and be able to do that kind of analysis. We do a lot of work with mapping, so there's mapping capabilities and other things that you can find the data. And then we also have this great service that is called 311. Has anyone heard of 311? Yay! Okay, so I'm talking in the middle part of the room then. So 911, you guys all have heard of, right? So you just push 911 on your phone, you immediately get connected to emergency services. So this is for non-emergency services, 311. It'll just connect you directly with those numbers. I actually get to oversee this service, so it's in my department. And so what this does is anytime you're in the city and something's bugging you, you can report it. So graffiti, potholes, bulky items that are left out. So especially like right around the beginning, end of the month when people are moving in and out of apartments, and you see like couches and chairs show up on the sidewalks, particularly around UCLA, I'm just saying, you know, we have a lot of people moving in and out of dorms. So if the sanitation department doesn't know to come pick it up if somebody doesn't tell them. So you can just call 311 and say there's something at this intersection or there's a big pothole at this location. Boom, within 24 to 48 hours we will be out to pick it up, fix it, replace it, or paint it over, whatever it is that you want us to do. And so you can call with any kind of need for getting connected to somebody at the city, asking a question, finding out about our new cannabis regulations. That's a very popular one these days. Or, you know, street parking, any kind of questions. We're there to help and serve, and we have a mobile app that's used heavily. We get about 2.5 million questions a year from people in the public who want to be able to get stuff done. Then we also have a lot of personal assistants. Okay, so does anybody have a personal assistant? That's awesome. I always wanted a personal, I can't afford a personal assistant, but I've always wanted to have a personal assistant. And so the best that I can do is Siri on my phone, right? Siri, tell me this, Siri, tell me that. But those personal assistants are getting wicked smart. So whether you are with Amazon Echo, any Amazon Echo users? Always listening on in your house? I'm about to give my husband one of those for his birthday. It's on Sunday. And then we have chat bots that let you sort of get chat help on the website. And then we want to be able to take all of these technologies and empower them with the knowledge that like our 311 operators have. So if you have an Amazon Echo or Alexa, you can say, sorry that this is our number one question, how do I pay my parking ticket in the city of Los Angeles? But you can also say, what's happening this weekend near me? And we have our city events calendar and other data and information up there. So Alexa will tell you all the great cool things that are happening this weekend in the city. With chat, we actually have, this is Chip, the chatbot. The LAPD now uses it, they call him Officer Chip, so just saying. He's got a little badge on that one. And so you can go on a page, and you know how you've done chat with like agents when you're trying to get computer things fixed and stuff, or trying to buy something, or a website breaks. So the first bit of when you go to a city chat is actually not a person. It's an artificial intelligence. It's an agent assistant. And so Chip gets on there and helps to guide you and maybe gives you the information you need without having to actually reach a person. At some point, if you're not getting an answer, and Chip says, I don't know, more than twice, then one of our agents dives in and picks up the chat. So it's a way to answer more questions quickly to people who like chat technology. It's not for everybody. And then be able to not have to sort of like have our operators constantly answering the same questions over and over again. So as we're rolling these out, I keep thinking efficiency, right? Makes it so that I don't have to hire as many people to do the sort of mundane stuff. It means that we're able to help people get answers faster. But what I didn't realize is that this actually helps a completely different segment of the population in a very different way. So I serve on a council called Aging into the Future. So it's working with elderly people and looking at how technology can support and empower them. So we think about autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars, and suddenly that becomes a really interesting conversation if you no longer feel safe driving or you don't have your license. But agent technology is also fascinating. So some of the folks that I've spoke to, when we talked about, well, you know, how useful is Alexa? Well, it turns out for some of our elderly population, it's very useful. So the ability to say, oh, Alexa, remind me to turn the stove off in 10 minutes. Oh, Alexa, remind me to take my medication at this time every day or every week. Or for a caregiver to be able to instruct Alexa to be able to help somebody. It changes the dynamic from when somebody is independent to dependent and pushes that out. Because suddenly technology is there to help them and support them so they can continue to live an independent life without having to be worried about some of these mundane things that often trip us into having to go into assisted living. So although these technologies seem a little silly at times, a little trivial, it actually has a huge impact in the quality of life for a lot of people. So how many people here have been through a natural disaster? 94 Northridge quake? Some people are too young. Okay, so the scariest thing about an earthquake. What's the scariest thing about an earthquake? The shaking, you can't predict it. I owe you $10. You can't predict it, right? You don't know when it's going to come. So my best friend lives in Florida, and she thinks I'm crazy to live in earthquake country, and I think she's crazy to live in hurricane country, because at least twice a year she calls me from her basement laundry room. We're sheltered down again. And I'm like, why do you live there? And she's like, well, you live where there's earthquakes. I'm like, I lost a vase in 1994. I'm fine. So, but we all know that the earthquakes are unpredictable. You don't know when it's coming, and there's always a sense in the back of your mind. So what if by the end of this year you had the ability to know when an earthquake was coming? Would that be useful? Great. So I want you to stay in touch with me and listen to the news from Mayor Eric Garcetti. So we have been working with the U.S. Geological Survey, who has put sensors in the ground up and down the west coast of the country. And these sensors detect the shaking of an earthquake. So the epicenter, right? So where it happens. So they detect it. Now the ground shakes are slower than our ability to send a communication signal across the airwaves. So we have the ability to pull that communication signal in and let you know 1 to 2 minutes before the earthquake's going to hit where you are. Now, if it happens right under us right now, we're not only going to get a couple seconds warning. But if it's happening, say, in Bakersfield, if it's happening in San Diego, if it's happening in Venice, we'd still get warning. And that warning is sufficient for us to figure out, okay, so we're on the 51st floor, well, at least we want to hunker down, we want to stop, duck, and cover. But if we're outside, we also can get to a safe place. If we're driving, we can pull over. If we're a physician in an operation, we can get our patient to a stable place and pull our instruments out. If we use machine learning, we're able to open firehouse doors. We can send that signal to the mechanism that controls our firehouse doors, open it up so the fire trucks can get out faster. We can put public announcement services in our schools and other places that will let everybody know, even if they don't have their smartphone up right then. So this ability will be rolled out by the end of this year to everybody in Los Angeles. We're the first city to do this with the U.S. Geological Survey and Caltech, and this is one of the programs that I'm very involved in. So the other thing we're doing, and Carl and I were talking about STEM earlier. So have you guys heard the term STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and math, right? So we want to put more kids into STEM, because STEM and STEAM, all right, let's hear it for the arts. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. I'm all for that. And so part of what we're trying to do is think, how do we get this next generation of kids really engaged in science, technology, engineering, math, and arts, and be able to help them get engaged with it? And so I'm all about doing some of this through gaming, because I think gaming can actually be an educational opportunity. And so this is a game that we have in partnership with LA County, and it's called Discovery Agents. And so these girls are playing this game. They're in a park, and they're looking through the park. You guys heard of Pokemon Go? Okay, so it's augmented reality. So augmented reality means that as I'm looking at my phone, I'm seeing all of you sitting here, right? Like it just looks like I'm looking through my phone. But then right in front of me, there's a jaguar on the table. Now it's not really there. But on my phone, it looks like it's right there. And then the jaguar jumps to another table, and another table, and another table, and I try and catch it. So they're trying to catch some of our local flora and fauna. They're trying to identify different things in the parks. They're looking for different quests that they can find out about urban heat or air quality. They're taking scientific measurements. So we have this augmented reality game that's in our parks and City Hall, and we're rolling out to more places, that really connects kids and helps them understand more about the environment around them. And this is one of the ways we're trying to engage this next generation of learners. And part of this is we're just about getting ready to do agents of climate. So these are agents going through looking at nature, but now we're trying to have them go out and actually capture scientific information about the temperature. Remember the heat wave we just had? So the temperature was really hot, but it was, in different areas of the city was much more hot. And so we wanted to understand where the heat was. We call them heat islands. particularly in areas that often are poorer neighborhoods where there's less green spaces, where we have a lot of asphalt. It gets much hotter there than it does in areas, say, around Westwood, where we have more park spaces. So we want to make sure that we're able to teach those kids that next generation of technologies. And we also had wildfires this year. We'll have another one, I'm sure. And so this is a drone. You guys, I know, have seen drones around. Maybe you have a drone. So we use drones with our LA Fire Department as a way of flying over fires to identify hot spots. So the cameras they have are not just visual cameras, which is kind of what people often think, like, oh, we're looking over, looking for flames, but we're not actually. We're using infrared cameras, and we're looking particularly at nighttime, but also during the day, we're looking for areas where there are heat spots, embers still burning, potential flare-ups. This has helped us to be able to fight fires faster, get them out sooner, be able to keep them from spreading, and keep our firefighters safer. And so the ability to use a pretty, what is today a pretty standard technology, like you can buy these for your kids, right? So the standard technology is being used in ways that really transform how we do regular city services. But perhaps the most exciting thing around autonomy is this ability to have autonomous vehicles. So who would trust a self-driving car? Like if we had one outside right now, who would get in it and try it out? Okay. And who thinks the people who just raised their hands are crazy? Okay. So the thing is that driving is actually a set of rules that we all follow, right? I didn't know Kim before this. I don't know you, but I trust that if we're sitting next to each other in traffic, that we're all going to follow the same rules because we all want to get someplace safely together. And so if we can figure out a way to embed those rules, to understand those rules into a car, into the intelligent systems of a car, we can have self-driving cars. So think about it. It's not that complicated. You don't want to hit anything. Okay, number one rule of driving. You want to follow the lines that are painted in the roads. You want to follow street signs, which all look pretty similar, like a stop sign looks the same all over the United States and Canada. And so we can also program in the location of roads, driving transit. And so autonomous vehicles are actually operating today on the streets of California. So there's not a lot of them, and the companies don't have to even tell a city that they're operating that way. What we know is that this is going to fundamentally change how we design cities. So if I have an autonomous vehicle, and I'm one of those people like, I cannot wait. If I don't even have that long a commute, but if I don't have to be driving and be distracted with that, I can either game or rest or talk or work or study or read or do something that is much more interesting to me and much more rewarding to me than driving my vehicle in LA traffic. And so I don't even have to own a car. I can own a service. I can subscribe to a service that lets me use autonomous vehicles wherever I'm at. And essentially becomes this massive capability for all of us to use. So let's think back to those elderly citizens. For the elderly, they suddenly see a lot more independence. If I'm feeling less secure about my driving, if I'm feeling like, I'm tired, it's harder for me to drive at night as I get older, then suddenly autonomous vehicles are amazing. If I'm a millennial and I just really don't want the cost and inconvenience of a car, autonomous vehicles are amazing. And if I'm a city planner, this opens up new possibilities. So this building here, I know we have some architects in the room, so this building here has a ton of underground parking because the city requires you to have a certain number of parking spaces based on the number of offices, right? It's a pain, right? There's other things you could do either with the money you spent building parking or with that space. You could do whatever you want with that space. Autonomous vehicles don't have to be where you end up. They can drive themselves some other place, or they can go and connect to some other person. So we're working with our Department of Transportation around the idea of autonomous vehicles, how we're going to redesign spaces around the city, how we're going to make things more pedestrian friendly, more scooter friendly, more bike friendly, and then also think three-dimensionally. So I spent 32 years at NASA, so I always think three-dimensionally whenever I think of a civic space. And taking the cars off the ground and into the air is a generation that is not as far away as you might think. So there are organizations already working on this. We're working with a lot of them to think about how are we going to put skyports in, how are we going to be able to move people around, how are we going to just completely redefine the idea of traffic and transportation in a way that really lets people live and work and play wherever they want to go. And then of course we're doing all of this in anticipation of the Olympics. So the last time we had the Olympics, no, give it up for Mayor Garcetti. I have known the mayor for a while, and he was like a little kid when we got the Olympics. See, this is a passion project for him. So I was a UCLA student when the last Olympics were here. Okay, I quickly do the math. But I was a poor UCLA student, and so the only way I got to go to the Olympics was I volunteered a lot for a bunch of things around the Olympic Village at UCLA, and then I got tickets to like archery and fencing, which I thought was super cool. And so actually fenced. I was the varsity fencer at UCLA. And so the ability to think about driving all of these changes, all of these technologies, all of these new ideas towards a goal that's 10 years away, and how we will be a city poised for really showcasing all of this during the Olympics, and how LA is really a leader in so many of these areas. Now, I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of ideas around this sort of global conversation. So one is the idea around climate change. So again, having been at NASA for 30 years, I don't see this as a political question. It's simply a scientific question. So the climate is changing. We all see it. We can even sense it even in the immediacy of year to year. And so although the US government has pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, which is an agreement that would help us decrease, improve air quality and decrease carbon emissions, the rest of the world continues to move on. And Mayor Garcetti has formed 382 climate mayors. So these are mayors of large towns all over the world who have agreed that they will uphold the Paris Accord and be able to continue to work on having better air quality and better carbon emissions as we move into the future. So as a kid growing up, this is what LA looked like to me. And you'll hear me coughing because I have chronic bronchitis because I grew up in a city that looked like this. So this is what we looked like. And if you look at current pictures of Beijing and parts of China, you'll see it looks just like this. But now we look, okay, not every day clear like that, but most days pretty darn clear, right? And even on days where we have smog, it's not like this. And it's because of ongoing increased protections and data that we gather and understand about the impact we have on the environment around us. And those sorts of data-driven decisions, the policies that the government makes behind this, whether it's at the city level or the regional level or the state or national, makes a huge difference in our ability to simply live. And so we need to think about that in context as part of a mega city of other cities around the world. I mean, our city is bigger than 23 states. We are the 13th, just the Southern California region is the 13th largest economy in the world, just Southern California. So when we think about this, there's this idea of the global goals. So I flew in, as I was telling Wayne earlier, at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was at the United Nations giving a talk yesterday about the work that we're doing in Los Angeles around the Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals, things like ending poverty, ending hunger, improving health, getting good jobs, climate action, sustainable communities, peace and justice. 17 goals that 196 countries have stepped up, signed up, and said by 2030, we will make significant progress on trying to achieve what we have jointly defined to be a better world. A world where kids don't go to bed hungry, where everybody has access to education, where girls are safe, where we are able to, have clean water and clean air. And so every country is working in their own way to try to achieve these goals. And so the goals are ones that the city has also stepped up. So we joined 196 countries as one of the first cities to step up to try to look at how we're using data to change the face of Los Angeles, to step up and global leadership to really think differently about the fact that we have 30,000 people who live unsheltered every night on the streets of Los Angeles. How are we as a city going to address that in a way that is humane, and actionable and actually helps people get housing. So while all of that great stuff is going on, we have to realize that there are challenges we have. Part of the things that we're trying to do differently is we have put $438 million towards homelessness in the city this year alone to creating more housing. We have a program called Our Cycle, sponsored by our council president, Herb Wesson, that helps us get free computers to kids and families in underserved neighborhoods, as well as 4 years of free Wi-Fi and internet access. And the mayor stepped up with the most aggressive promise to every single graduating LA Unified School District child, which is called the College Promise, which means if you graduate from LAUSD, you will get 2 free years of community college. And from that, we broker it into a step up to UCLA, a step up to another of the UCs, a step up to the Cal States. Wayne, I think it was this year, just a week ago, that UCLA announced the highest transfer rate acceptance for students from California. And as we do this, we think about these issues around digital inclusion. This map shows areas in the city where people do not have access to the internet at home that's affordable or reliable. These are the neighborhoods of South LA and Watts, downtown. Not so much over here in Brentwood and Bel Air. We're doing pretty well over there, as you can imagine. So I'm working with every telecommunications provider to change the way in which they put in new internet connectivity, including a new technology called 5G, which is the next generation. If you look on your phone, you see 3G, 4G, 5G, 5G generation. And that will be an order of magnitude faster connection, and we want to make sure that every neighborhood here has equal and equitable access to it. And so we work as a city to change the way that companies think about working with us, to give them the access they need to our rights of way, and be able to change how they think of that. And then we try to work with citizens to help change this idea. So we started out talking about Sin City and co-creating the city of the future. But I mean, it's nice for me to say that, but it's not. But what really happens is when it's actionable. So there's a group called Hack for LA. It's awesome. And they work with technologists and just people who don't understand technology but are passionate about a topic. And every week we meet Tuesday nights downtown, Wednesday nights on the west side, Thursday nights in South LA. And then we put together ideas around getting access to clean and healthy food, how to work for city government, being able to understand parking regulations. Okay, maybe it's not transformational, but have you ever tried to understand those parking signs? Like Hollywood, get your act together. You think you park safely, but okay. And then work about public art, understanding how public art lifts up and reflects the culture of the community. And then we've also put together a data science federation. So this is a project I did that really sparked out of the work I'd done with UCLA over all these years, realizing that as a professor, my students never had access to data, right? They had to use crappy data in the back of the books, data that didn't mean anything, and everybody knew these were just exercises. So now we have, actually we just added 2 more universities. The latest school is called Girls Who Code. It's 10th through 12th graders, and we're working with their summer cohort right now. So it's not really a university, but we're counting them in. And they work on city data challenges. So each year we get about 250 students coming through the program. We just had 21 start yesterday, actually embedded in the city for the summer program. And they learn new data science projects, programs, technologies. We connect with university professors to build it into their curriculum, so that what we're doing is helping those kids learn how to apply their STEM ideas, make a real difference. City departments agree at the beginning to take seriously what the students have and adopt the projects that come out of these programs. And then I just want to hire the heck out of every one of the students. Because one of the things is our city is having a huge retirement bubble. And we have 20,000 job openings over the next 4 years. So if anybody is looking for work, if anybody wants to make a difference, if anybody wants to be part of co-creating that city of the future, please see me, because we're hiring. We're hiring a lot of people. And some of the people we're hiring are people like this. So this is one of the things, let me wrap it all back into UCLA Extension, that Wayne very graciously allowed me to do. So as a professor, as an instructor, I really wanted to be able to not just teach people who were sort of already educated in issues around big data and analytics and data science and knowledge management. I really wanted us to be the University of California at Los Angeles writ large, at Los Angeles in every one of our neighborhoods. And that I feel that every single person in the city has an amazing story and an amazing idea to tell. And so Wayne let me take my courses out of Westwood. This is a course I teach in South LA. I also teach in Pico Union, two of our most impoverished neighborhoods. My students are homeless. They're coming out of recovery programs. They're gang members. They're coming out of jail. They're just single moms. They're amazing individuals. They're folks who just, are not in the same circumstances that normal UCLA students are. And what we do is we use really extensive high-tech technologies. Can you see? Legos. We start with Legos. And we build an idea they have on how to improve life in their neighborhood. Any idea at all. And we help them, give them project management skills, data skills, mapping skills, space of 5 days. So for 5 days, I take them through all of this, and we actually build the projects. So it goes from, I want to make things better for moms who are about to lose their kids. That was one of my recent students, because they're having trouble in the court system. And so I said, well, what do you think that would be? We figured it out together. The students banded around her, so we got grouped together, and she launched a self-help legal aid group in Pico Union for people who had been in situations like hers. We deployed, and we did a whole weekend of transforming Pico Union, 8 building-sized murals, an alley that was reconverted into play space. We petitioned the city and just finally got a whole dead-end cul-de-sac that was just trashed, reconverted into an ongoing plaza for entertainment and cultural affairs. We started the legal aid group. We put up some community classes. This is a group of about 20 students who, before they came to this class, most of them weren't employed, most of them were really struggling. And they changed their neighborhood. I was just a little spark in that. They changed their neighborhood, and every day they walk in that neighborhood and they know that they've made a difference. Because that's the power of education when applied to a practical way that transforms the city around them and lets anybody have that opportunity to move forward. So I just want to thank Wayne for letting me continue to have this opportunity to be a little bit crazy in how we're doing education. So all of these technologies you talked about before, we're really trying to harness those in ways that help lift up every single voice in Los Angeles, every one of those 4 million stories that we have to say, and be able to launch those into the communities, into the neighborhoods to help improve. Technology is just the lubricant in all of this. It's the fuel that makes it go faster. But the real power of technology is not whether you can code, it's whether you can dream. And the bigger you dream and the more dreams you put together and the more you try to make those dreams into reality, the better the city's going to be. And that's what I want to encourage and invite all of you to do. Whether you want to quit your job and come work for the city of Los Angeles because we're hiring, or whether you would just like to be part of one of these projects or connect to me, we would love for you to be part of the future of the city and really looking at how to make sure that all of us together lift it up. Do you want to chat about me it, or you were listening?
Hi, thank you. My name is Nick Burns. I'm here with the Peyton Regal folks. And I was just wondering how, from a managerial perspective, often I think we think of technology as like inherently good, but often new technology can have unintended negative consequences. And I was especially thinking about that in terms of autonomous vehicles, where maybe it crowds out some investments in public transit, things like that. But in general, I'm wondering how you think about institutionalizing kind of a risk analysis of what these new technologies are going to do for the city. At the same time, you're thinking about how excited we should be about the positive transformations they could be making.
Sure. So that balance between the risk and the opportunity of technology is when you always have to measure. So we'll talk about autonomous vehicles. So autonomous vehicles, are going to be amazing, But autonomous vehicles are also going to displace people who currently drive for a living, right? So driving a vehicle is the #1 employer of like good paying blue collar jobs across the country. It's going to be highly disruptive, and that will have a huge consequence on quality of life in our neighborhoods. So that's why you hear me talking about STEM, getting kids into STEM, and also retraining. We have the Office of Economic Workforce and Development, and Jeff Wharton and I are working on an amazing project called Find Your Future, which is helping people who are right now disconnected youth, but also people who may need career transition retraining. So that helps to connect people to employers and career tracks and education that they might need to go into that next generation. So I think it's always this challenge. Any opportunity, anything powerful enough like technology has the ability to shift power. And that can affect people's livelihoods, it can affect people's money, it can affect people's perception of how powerful they are, and all of those things have to be dealt with in a way that makes everybody part of the conversation.
Hi, Jeanne. My name is Cheryl. Thanks for a great talk. Really appreciate it. Wondering, as you look at those underserved communities on your internet access map, how we're going to adjust with the change in the net neutrality rules. How are we going to get more access to those neighborhoods?
Yeah, so the question is around net neutrality and the effect particularly in impoverished neighborhoods, but it's true for any neighborhood. So net neutrality, it keeps bouncing back and forth and back and forth. I don't know how to predict this current administration and exactly where things are going to settle. So net neutrality means that I can access a page that you put up for your business as quickly as I can for UCLA Extension, which is a big provider of information online. If we don't have net neutrality, it means that I can't find your stuff because you're not paying as much as Wayne is to get online. And unless I pay a lot more, and then I have a privilege, right? So I have a certain privilege because I can pay. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to do that. So the city of Los Angeles and the state of California are very aggressive about our support of net neutrality. We work with and support lobbyists. That's part of what a local government can do that help to promote those same ideas. We strongly, strongly feel that net neutrality is the only way to be able to equitably provide access, free and open access to information coming across the internet, but other technology sources too. So we have been fighting the current federal administration in their intent to shut down net neutrality. And as a city, we are looking at some creative ideas on how we might be able to do local regulations around making sure that the providers here have to abide by certain regulations. It's a little technically complex, and so it's better if we agree as a state or as a bigger region. Yes?
I'd like to know a little bit more about the earthquake alert system.
Yeah.
And I'm so pleased to hear that that is underway. And what kind of warning times? I'm sure there's a range and it just depends on the circumstances with each event. But how much notice would we receive?
So again, if it's right under us, it's only a few seconds. Because if you're right at that epicenter, there's no time for the airwaves to transmit fast. In general, though, most people are some distance from an epicenter. So I have an early version, not the version we're going to roll out to the public, an early version that's pretty buggy on my phone right now. So when there's an earthquake in Seattle, I get 5 to 7 minutes warning. When there's earthquakes sort of in the general Southern California neighborhood, I can get 1 to 2 minutes warning. So it's not a lot, but again, there's two things that this does, three. One is it gives you a little bit of relief that you'll know, right? So it gives you some certainty. Number two is that it lets you get prepared. And number three is that it lets us prepare other automated systems. So for example, LAX is part of the city, and as is the Port of Los Angeles, which is the largest port in the Western Hemisphere. Port of Los Angeles, 40% of all imports to the entire country come through the Port of Los Angeles. So when we've got the ships coming in and out, we will be able to automatically raise those big arms that come down and lift the containers off the ships. And at LAX, we can shut down the fuel valves. So that means that suddenly we don't have a risk of fire or explosions, because sometimes when an earthquake, the lines come and then you guys have all seen the movies. Okay, so it's a little over dramatic, but yeah, there's a lot of risk when you have a huge amount of fuel and jet fuel. So the ability to stop the fuel flowing until we know that the area is stabilized is one of the things that LAX is looking at right now.
Will the city be able to shut down gas lines under streets in neighborhoods?
It depends how much technology we have embedded. So some of our systems are super old. We have sewer pipes. UCLA knows this because a bunch of them broke a few years ago. So we have sewer and water pipes that are from the 1800s. So those don't have the ability for us to really control. But some of the newer areas in a lot of downtown, we would be able to do some different kinds of control for through the Department of Water and Power.
Last question.
This has been a very, very informative presentation. I truly enjoyed it. But I do have a question for you. You know, having seen on television the disruption of our meetings in NATO and the meetings in Helsinki, and I think about this. The disruption that technology is going to have on the third world, coupled with climate change, coupled with pollution, there's going to be a displacement of jobs, especially for those people living in the third world, not too dissimilar to this disruption that the runaway companies have made to citizens in our middle states like Nebraska, Iowa, and places like that. My question is there a consideration for developing a new discipline that will help those societies adapt to technology, robots, and all the things that we in the first world know is time-saving and life-preserving?
So I'm going to answer that question in a very personal way. So yes, there are a lot of things going on that are trying to help developing nations to get ready for these kinds of technology changes. In some cases, actually, those countries have an advantage in specific areas where right now we still lay fiber in the ground when we're putting in broadband, but they're using beam technology, drones, airborne lift. So there's some ways to leapfrog over certain technologies if you don't have a lot of investment. But personally, Carl, I believe very strongly in what you're saying. I actually so with the World Bank, my job was to help lift up open data in Africa. So I focused exclusively, well, Africa, India, and Russia. That was interesting. We can talk about that later. But I felt so passionate about that work that even though I came to the city afterwards, I started up a new company in Africa. So we're based in Nairobi, and so we hold events throughout the year and training organizations, and we partner with a group called Code for Africa. So we teach young people, hundreds and hundreds at a time, these new technologies. We help them understand drones. It's really amazing, giving people access to like these small drones for the first time, and 3D printers, and we just expose them to a ton of new technologies so they have new ideas. And then we give them training in data science. So I give it up Bruce, who runs a local data science incubator for UCLA Extension. So we then give them training in data science because that's one of the light lift but high intelligence kinds of things that people can do when they're motivated and interested. So I actually do on the ground training programs throughout Africa on that because I believe, just as you do, that the difference between having the ability to lift up the technologies is really about humans' imagination and ability to do that. Great. Thank you so much.
Please help me thank Jeanne. That was phenomenal. I know we all learned so much. This concludes our program today. We hope to see you all at Town Hall, and thank you again to UCLA Extension for sponsoring today's wonderful program. Thank you.